Okay, well, I think, yes, thank you, Sarah. I think we should get started. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to CDAF's workshop on Friday afternoon. So basically what we want to do today, we want to talk about two very important issues. The first is assessment and accreditation. And as you all know, we are coming back to a new term where some of us are coming back into the classroom face-to-face. Some, from what I understand, are doing a mix of face-to-face plus online delivery. A few are even doing just online delivery from what I can gather from talking to colleagues. But irrespective of what method of teaching we're going to adopt in the coming semester and in the coming academic year, we are all faced with the same problem, which is how do we assess and ensure that the assessment is of good quality, and probably as important, how do we ensure that we meet the accreditation requirements? So that's really what the first half of the workshop is going to be about. And we're delighted that ICAEW, ICAS, ACCA and CIMA are joining us today to give us their perspective on how they see accreditation going forward. And what we have also done, we have compiled a short summary from each of the four professional bodies, and that will be made available to you after the workshop. So in addition to listening to the professional bodies, we actually have a written kind of summary of how they expect things to be going forward. The other thing we're going to be doing at 3 o'clock to 4:30, we're going to be looking at rebooting for next year. Well, I'm delighted to find out how I can reboot myself, because I'm information overload at the moment completely, like probably the rest of you. The emails are coming in thick and fast, and it's hard to just keep on top of that. So we've got Hilary Lindsay and Jenny Rose who are joining us today, and they're going to tell us a little bit, hopefully, about how to adapt and cope in this new environment that we're in. So just before I hand over to the first speaker, ICAEW, or Paul, I think it is, if you open up the chat, can you maybe open up the chat so we can follow the chat as we're going along? And please do participate, because that's the whole idea of this particular workshop, and indeed in everything that we do in CDAF. For those of you who don't know CDAF, I forgot to mention that at the start, CDAF is the Committee of Departments of Accounting and Finance. We essentially represent the UK Departments of Accounting and Finance, but there are other people in the room today who aren't necessarily heads of department, but those people are also our audience. Okay, so Paul Jennings has just put in to the chat, you will see a link to a short questionnaire that we would like you to participate in at some point in time during the workshop today. And what we're trying to do here, we're trying to find out what you value about CDAF and the sort of services that you would like to see more of, and also the sorts of topics of interest that you have in terms of workshops that we undertake, and of course the annual conference. So any feedback you can give us would be greatly appreciated. So this is an excellent way of us reaching out and listening to the membership. Okay, so without further ado, I will introduce Judy Dimmick plus Dominic. Dominic's there somewhere, Dominic Shee.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. So if you wouldn't mind speaking for about 10 minutes on what your take on assessment and accreditation is, update and implications going forward. And what I'll do, I'll just put my watch on. So I'll kind of try and give you a prompt when we're near the end. So thank you, Judy.
Okay, so is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I've got to find
You should be able to now, hopefully, yeah.
I haven't got the slides up, sorry. Sorry.
That's right, don't worry.
I'll just do it without. Is that okay? So in terms of ICAEW accreditation, I'm sure most people are familiar with the rules and the reason why they're there, but I thought I would just start briefly by explaining why we do things a certain way and what restrictions and regulations there are. So essentially, we have always, with our accredited body, accredited institutions, we've always insisted that any module that's used for a student to gain CPL, we call it credit for prior learning, against one of the ACA modules must be assessed at least 50% by a written invigilated exam. But that isn't an ICAEW rule. So essentially, we are regulated by the FRC because our qualification leads potentially to statutory auditor status. Therefore, it comes under regulations contained within the Companies Act. So for those that are interested, Schedule 11 of the Companies Act, paragraph 8, has some very specific wording around where we may and may not award an exemption to a student, and it has to be based upon an examination of equivalent standard. And that's where this rule comes from, that I think has caused us all so many headaches and problems over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, where holding on campus invigilated exams has been so difficult. Because we have then had to go to our regulator and ask them for some concessions to say, please, can we relax this rule, because holding examinations is virtually impossible, and obviously we're not geared up to do something else because we need time to put something alternative in place. So I'm sure you're all aware the concessions that have been given have allowed us to accept other forms of assessment, and that concession, the final extension the FRC has given us, is until the end of this year, so the 31st of December. From January 2022 onwards, we'll revert back to the rule that we used to enforce, which is that where you're running a module that's going to be used towards ICAEW accreditation, at least 50% of the assessment must come from an invigilated exam. One of the things that's changed a lot over this period of time is remotely invigilated exams. We ourselves now remotely invigilate our own exams at both certificate level and professional and advanced level, and we can accept that. So it doesn't have to be face-to-face invigilation, doesn't have to be on a specific platform. We don't have any restrictions in place as to which platform we need you to use, what sort of proctoring, how you run it. That's down to each individual university to do what works for them. But if it's something that they want to sort of explore and start using that for some of their assessments, we can accept that. Sorry, Dominic. So I think Dominic has got a few things to say generally about the partner in learning scheme as well and how we work with the universities, but that's the specific point that I think you wanted us to talk about around accreditation and an update on where we were since the last time we had one of these meetings.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I wanted to add, and it's not specifically around, I guess, assessment accreditation, just I guess putting CPL for us in just a bit more context. And I think a lot of you might have heard me talk about this before, about the broader way that we work with universities is through the Partner in Learning Scheme, which is completely free. And universities sign up to the Partner Learning Scheme, and that's sort of how we build our relationship sort of going forward. And a part of that is accreditation. So if you have accreditation, you can apply, and then you get access to our ACA learning materials, a login online to access teaching resources as well. So if your institute's a partner learning, I can set you up with a login so you can have access to that. And we have all sorts of different partnerships, very varied partnerships. Some of our partners have accreditation and they might use some of our learning materials. The other end of the spectrum would be very integrated programs with employers, ACA students, students sitting ACA exams at university, embedding ICAEW qualifications. So we have a big range of partnerships across the UK and globally as well, and credit for prior learning sort of forms part of that and falls under the Partner Learning Scheme banner. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was just we do have an academia and education community as well, which I think a lot of people on this call are involved with. But again, it's just another place, if you're not familiar with it, it's a good place to go to sort of share and discuss ideas around as well, around accreditation, sort of design, technology, and that's sort of open for sort of professionals and academics working in higher education as well. But that's all I wanted to add. So not specifically around assessment, but just a bit more context.
Okay, Judy, do you want to say anything more?
I just wondered how we're doing for time, because I noticed that there's a couple of questions.
We're okay for time, actually. We've only got 6 minutes, so we could address the questions now. So you're right. Does written include typed on a PC/laptop?
Yes. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with how ICAEW exams are. We have certificate level exams, which are use a lot of multiple choice style questions and pro formas that are filled in, which are very much on a platform. Our professional and advanced level exams have been adapted over the years, so they were always on paper before, they're now on a platform, but the style of the exam has not changed. So the exam content is as it would have been. And then we're now starting to embrace embedding more technology within the exams now that they are all online computerized exams. We're starting to add in things like data analytics software, which we could do, which we wouldn't have been able to do before when they were paper-based exams. But that doesn't mean when we're looking at what is an equivalent exam from a university perspective that we're expecting the exams to look like ours. It's more to do with how the skills are assessed and how the learning outcomes are examined. So we're looking for equivalence in that respect, not in how it's delivered, what the platform looks like. How do I
bring my speakers back on?
Sorry,
Pardon? Who's that?
Sorry.
Yeah. So yes. So it can be typed. It can be handwritten. It's entirely up to what resources that each institution has at their disposal, I guess.
Okay. Judy, thank you very much, and Dominic, very much. That was a great summary. There was another query, but I would like to leave it for the moment because I suspect it's going to be a bigger query that relates to maybe all of the professional bodies, which is the issue around proctoring and the issue around some legal teams telling some universities that it is against human rights, etc. So violating student privacy, etc. So I suggest that we come back to that there at the end, because I think that is going to be a big issue. Okay, so Judy and Dominic, thank you again. Okay, so can I ask now Lorraine McGlintock, Accreditation Manager from ACCA. Lorraine, yes, if you wouldn't mind speaking about how ACCA are viewing this. Thank you.
Okay, can I just check that you can see my screen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can see some nodding heads. Thank you so much. So thank you. My name is Lorraine Harvey, sometimes McClintock. I go between the two, and I'm the Accreditation Manager at ACCA. First of all, I'd like to take you through a few exam considerations. So ACCA exams are still taking place through CBE centres and remote invigilation. The ACCA rulebook states that members should have passed examinations to be eligible for membership. Given these factors, we're still looking for a comparable examination experience. As Judy mentioned, FRC require that at least 50% of marks come from an examination, and they have not, according to recent communication, dictated whether it should be through face-to-face or online examinations. Face-to-face invigilated exams are still acceptable, but we have to recognise the current climate. We have also reviewed recent QAA guidance around this, and we know that universities in the UK will be considering different methods of assessment too. ACCA's position is still pending formal approval through our governance procedures. And just to note that we will try as much as possible, and again, I think Judy mentioned this too, we'll be trying to encourage FRC to review their position as new technology comes through and as you consider different assessment methods. Our current thinking is ACCA is open to different assessment methods, and we will not dictate what universities need to do. However, we would expect you, and therefore us, to consider the following three considerations. First of all, ID authentication. So how will you make sure that the student is who they say they are and is the correct student? Will you use webcams, fingerprint technology, that sort of thing? Assessment style and structure. Is the assessment still comparable to ACCA's questions? And thirdly, integrity of the exam. How will you ensure that content isn't leaked? How will you ensure the student taking the exam is doing so unaided and they don't have access to unauthorised files or other resources? As mentioned previously, the aim is not to be prescriptive, it's to try and be as flexible as possible. And this position, as I say, is still pending approval. However, this is going to give you a flavour of what we're thinking of accepting and not accepting. So on screen there, you can see we are still thinking of accepting face-to-face invigilated exams, as you might expect, online exams with live invigilation, or online exams with record and review invigilation, where our thinking will be acceptable. Not accepted would be coursework or group work, and open book assessments with a larger time window. This is still in line with the 50% requirement set by FRC. And as I say, this still needs to be approved. We are very aware that communication with our institutions is important at a time like this. We've recently sent out emails to our UK contacts to communicate the deadline set by FRC of the end of December. And we're hoping to follow up on that communication very shortly, as we know your attention is turning to the next year and what you want to do with assessments and what you have to do in order to keep your accreditation with ACCA. So you will be hearing from us very shortly. So that's a fairly short update on where we are, but that's what I plan to go over with you today. Do you want to turn to questions next? Or?
Yes, I think we will do that there. So if you can maybe just stop sharing for a wee minute, Lorraine.
I'm just trying to figure out how to do that. Usually I use Teams.
Up at the top. It should be up at the top,
yeah.
maybe.
Got you. Thank you.
Okay. So so there's a question in here from Sarah from De Montfort. What is meant by larger time window?
So for example, if you give a student 24 hours to 48 hours to complete an exam, that's what we were intending by that point. Is
24 hours is too long then? Is that what you're saying?
That's the current thinking, yes, is that 24 hours or anything above that would be too long. Now, as I say, this is the first time we've had a chance to come out to institutions and talk to you about this, so it'll be really interesting to take your feedback. And we are also very aware of the international element. How prohibitive will that be? So it's really useful to take your feedback so that we can continue to have internal discussions.
Yeah, there's lots of other points being made in here. For example, what about 5 hours when invigilated is 3? Does that mean less than 24 hours is okay? Does that mean that open book may be allowed, but over a time constrained window, Lorraine?
So when we've been, like the other bodies, we've been pretty flexible given the situation, obviously, and we've tended to see that institutions, they have been running exams over a larger window, but they tend to be the online exams 3 to 4 hours. So we would be thinking that institutions will probably continue with that, but we do need to have a bit of a think as to whether there is going to be a definitive duration for exams that we will accept. As I say, the current thinking is anything over and above 3 or 4 hours in the 24 hours sort of area would be too long, but we're happy to take feedback, and that's why we're here to chat that through.
Yeah, I know at my own institution, Lorraine, for an open book exam, we give the students the normal time plus, which is 3 hours, plus we give them then an extra hour to upload, but they're expected to upload within, say, 15 or 20 minutes. So actually, we're not giving them anything extra.
No, I've seen that as well in the alternative assessments that we've been looking at, that it has been 3 or 4 hours with 15 minutes upload time. So we just have to think about the different factors that could be at play, for example, access to internet or the standard of Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. As I say, maybe more within the international markets, but we'll be having further discussions about that.
So just to summarise then, you're saying that 24 hours is unacceptable. So you're talking about a much smaller time frame, Lorraine, like maybe 3 hours plus a small amount. I think that's really what you're trying to say to us.
I think that's where we are at the moment in our thinking, yes.
Okay. There are so there's a number of comments here about, so it's the length of time does matter, but somebody else, Hafez, has made the point, is it the take-home exam is not acceptable? Are you still accepting a take-home exam? In other words, they do it at their computer at home, Lorraine?
Well, I think we would have some concerns with that type of exam. I think coming back to the three considerations that are presented, my question back to the institution would probably be, how are you going to ensure the students that it's the right student taking the exam? And how are you going to ensure that the student doesn't have access to unauthorised materials? I think those would be the concerns with that type of exam.
So we're back to invigilation or proctoring. Okay. Does the ACCA have any online invigilation software that they would support the use of?
I don't have that just to hand, but it's something I'd be happy to find out and come back to you on.
Okay, so, and another question, it would still need to be invigilated online. So I think we've confirmed that whatever's happening, it needs to be invigilated, whether it be in person or online, and the same for Judy, for ICAEW, exactly the same. Now, there's another question from Pauline. Pauline Wheatman, she's saying 24 hours to allow for time zones and student locations, also intermittent internet problems for students in poor locations. What do we do about that?
I think that's what we're saying though, with that open book exam, we do have to think about that particular scenario. So would we allow that open book exam, but with certain restrictions or certain assurances around student ID and the integrity of the exam? That is something that we have to continue to think about. I don't have a definitive decision on that, but we're obviously thinking about it. Okay.
Barbara from DCU has said, could you clarify that the new approach approved types is for 2022 and does not impact on assessment planned before the end of 21?
It's not, it's the alternative assessment, the flexible alternative assessments that we've been conducting up until now for the past year or so will continue between now and the end of December. So what we're talking about is from the 1st of January onwards.
So even if, Lorraine, the teaching takes place up to December, but the assessment doesn't take place until January, you're saying that the new rule has to apply?
The current thinking is yes, the new rule will apply for assessments from the 1st of January.
Okay. Someone else has put in a query. Students with reasonable adjustments are normally given longer window, but I think that's normal practice. Yeah. If you've got a certificate or whatever. Another one, 3-hour exam time within a 24-hour window. Is that acceptable? Now, I'm not sure. Would that only work if you could release it and then take it away within the 3 hours?
Say that again. What was the scenario?
It's Ting has said a 3-hour exam time within a 24-hour window acceptable. In other words, is that acceptable?
So you can take the exam in any 3 hours within 24 hours. That's a new one. I haven't had that one before. I think my position on this would be yes, but I would obviously factor that into other discussions.
Yeah, I suppose the issue made there, Lorraine, be come back to your 3 points: integrity.
Exactly.
How do you stop somebody downloading that and then passing it on to others?
Exactly. So that's the question we would ask there. How do we make sure there isn't any cheating going on as much as possible?
Okay. Another, Alison has asked a question. What about open book? Is open book exam allowed?
Well, open book exams, current regulations, exemption regulations, open book exams are permissible in the final year of a bachelor degree or postgraduate qualification. Where we're going here is open book exam, online open book exams, as I was saying, over a larger window. I think we've probably covered this point. Open book exams in a larger time window, as we've said, there's some debate that needs to take place. The current thinking is we wouldn't be comfortable with that, but we will debate that further.
Okay, there is another comment here from Angela. 2 hours access to an online exam within a 24-hour window. Is that acceptable? But again, that comes back to integrity. We've already answered that.
Yeah.
Rod from Birmingham has asked about digital poverty. He says digital poverty is not just international students, it's others as well that have, but we'll maybe come back to that issue.
Okay.
Okay, Anne Stafford from Manchester, you've said we have successfully reduced the amount of time needed to upload to 10 minutes. Excellent. We had no problems with uploading June, and we have large student numbers around the world. So Anne, you're obviously doing something right. Brilliant. I don't think we at Ulster have had any problems, but maybe Danielle McWall will confirm. I don't think we've had any problems with students uploading within about 15 minutes either. Okay, Sam Bell from Bristol has said, we have had a problem with a minority of students submitting online exams late, but are trying to mitigate this with the student providing evidence of technical disruption. So there needs to be some flexibility around submission windows to allow for this. Now, Sam, I don't know what Lorraine or Judy think about that, but certainly at Ulster, what we do, we get them to take photographs of all their pages, and they have a date, they have a time stamp on the photograph. And that's evidence that they've finished. Does that make, I don't know if that makes sense, Sam? And then if there's a problem with them uploading late, then we asked for that evidence.
Joan, I think from ICAEW perspective, we're aware that all of the universities already have a lot of quality assurance in place. So we're not expected to intervene and explain to you how you'll manage extenuating circumstances, technical problems that happen on the day. I'm sure you're all aware we have our own technical difficulties on exam days, and we have to deal with them as they arise, because you just can't predict what they're going to be. So what we're setting out here is the ideal. You know, yes. Things need to be as robust as possible. Things will go wrong, and we will trust you to manage that as best you can. But the parameters of that are what the FRC are expecting us to do is to monitor and ensure that things are run as robustly as they possibly can be. And from their perspective, that means invigilation. They're just not willing to accept yet that letting students sit exams, assuming that unsupervised they'll do the right thing, they're not comfortable with that yet. So invigilation is the key. Things like technical problems, if it takes them slightly longer to upload it than 10 minutes, you know, as you say, there can be all sorts of things that you can do to mitigate that and sort of keep it.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Judy. Now, I think what we'll do, I will monitor the chat, Lorraine and Judy, because there'll probably be other things. But if we just move on to Timothy Rutt, who's the Senior Director, Syllabus Development for CIMA. See, if you could, Timothy, you're there, yes. If you could start your presentation, and I will monitor this chat and take a few notes so we're not losing anybody's comments and bring them into the next discussion, okay?
Excellent. Thanks, Joan.
I think I've just made you a host, Tim, so you should be able to have screen share.
Excellent. Okay, so we're taking a slightly different approach at CIMA, and let me just sort of take you through it. So here we are. This is the response. We believe the future of management accounting will face a next normal, which is going to be uncertain. And therefore, we think sort of assessments shouldn't be following these sort of rigid traditional processes, and that universities should try and remain agile, adaptable, and open to continual learning, which we embrace. And this is the sort of statement that we've shared with our university partners. We're saying, yes, if you need to adapt your assessments, and not necessarily just for COVID, but for other reasons, we don't want to restrict that. And I'll explain why as we go through. So we have supported the challenges faced by universities, and we have actually encouraged innovative assessment practices, because we at CIMA rely on your quality standards, and we trust in the processes that you have in awarding degrees. And it's not for us to say what is an appropriate, you've gone through your processes, you've gone through your standards, we trust them. We are committed to protecting the public interest. And we do that because we're confident that our assessment processes are robust and determine only those university graduates who meet CIMA's professional competency standards will gain membership. I mean, to an extent, we don't offer as many exemptions as some of the other bodies as well, and I think that's part of the robustness that we show. So we're encouraging you to move beyond traditional exams and use innovative practices. And some of the partners we've spoken to, some of the universities we've spoken to have sort of welcomed this approach. And the reason we can do this is because we're focused on the process of on the practice of management accounting and co-creating sustainable value. And therefore, we're not an auditing body and we're not constrained by the FRC. So we hope you can, this is how we would like to see things going forward. And I think it was one of, I think it was the ICAEW earlier who said, we're trying to work with FRC to try and change these traditional methods to develop accountants who are more fit for the next normal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. If you wouldn't mind, maybe stop sharing your screen, that would be fantastic. So quite a different approach then, Tim, to the other professional bodies. So immediately I can see an issue in that if universities are wanting to provide accreditation from multiple bodies, then we have to go really with ICAEW and ACCA, what they're saying. So that's my starter for 10. So does anybody want to ask Tim some questions? Okay.
I was going to say I agree that we've got we have to go to the least common denominator, as it were, and if we've got exemption exams and exams that student want exemptions, we've got to run them through the most stringent, as it were, in terms of the requirements, because that's we don't want to lose it for those that get it. So that and we often use the same modules for similar exemptions. That's the thing. That's the issue, that if we're teaching management accounting, it would get exemptions from several of the bodies, and therefore we're going to have to potentially go with the whichever proctoring or invigilated route that we need to. So but
okay, so any other specific questions for Tim? Oh, Tim, sorry, there is a question in here. Apologies, from Nicola. Sorry, I'm just trying to monitor this. Could a program not containing any exams therefore obtain the full CIMA exemptions, Tim?
As I said before, it could, on the basis that you've gone through your robust quality standards and your process for awarding degree meets those standards. Yes, we would trust that you've done the right thing.
Okay, anybody else like to ask Tim in particular a question? There are a number of outstanding questions here, so I will need to go through them in a moment. But I think what we'll do is, let me just see, there might be a few questions coming at the bottom. As I understand it, Tim, your program, as I understand it, Tim, you base your accreditation off, I think that should be title of program, is that correct, Sue? Title, yes, Sue, that's correct. So what is that? I'm not sure really what that means. Do you understand that, Tim?
I think I know where it's coming from.
Okay.
We base our accreditation, if you're doing an accounting and a finance degree, we accept that it is an accounting and finance degree. You see, we only allow the accreditation, apart from special partners, they come in at our management learning level, which is quite low down. So they have a further 8 exams to do after that. So we're not as lenient in the amount of exemptions we're offering, which enables us to allow universities to innovate and to do things differently.
Yes, okay, yes. A few people have, well, one person has put in they like your approach here, Tim, which is positive. Just for those of you who have joined the session late, The situation basically is, if I've got it correct, Judy and Lorraine from ICAEW and ACCA, is that if exams are done remotely at home, then they have to be proctored or invigilated in some way. Or alternatively, you can have face-to-face invigilation. Isn't that correct, Judy and Lorraine? That's more or less the message. And this includes even for exams where you do the learning or the lecturing, etc., for this up to December, and then the assessment doesn't happen in January. So for those exams happening in January, they have to be either invigilated remotely or face-to-face. That's what we're basically saying. So hopefully, Sarah, that's answered your question there. Okay, now we are going. There is quite a few people are saying great approach, Tim, again for CIMA. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, now what we'll do, look, there are a few questions coming up here, but I'm taking note of everything. I'd just like to get, if you wouldn't mind, ICAS to provide their summary, and then what we'll do, we've got quite a bit of time at the end for answering these questions, so the remaining questions outstanding. So could I maybe ask Alice Deacon, who's the Executive Director of Learning. Alice, if you can tell us what your approach is.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Joan. Can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I'll start by saying hi and thanks for inviting us along. And you've got the short straw today because you've got me instead of Chris Canan, who's our head of syllabus, who is closer to university accreditation, I think works with some of you. But unfortunately, Chris had to step in and do some teaching today. And this was something I could do. I couldn't have done the tax teaching. So just to take you through, I mean, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with us as a body, so I just put some basic information there around the relative number of students, the fact that we do operate outside Scotland as well as within Scotland, you know, the number of our students with degrees at registration and relevant degrees. And I think just the important point that, you know, some of the other bodies have covered in the distinction, because I also love Tim's approach of trust at CIMA, unfortunately, because we do award the audit qualification in a way that means we're regulated by the FRC, like Judy and Lorraine at ICAEW and ACCA, our hands remain a little bit tied in terms of what we can and can't do because we have to follow our regulator guidance. So I'll come back to that. But just over half of our members do have the audit qualification, which is where the regulation comes in. And the last point, and I'll touch on this in a bit in case it's helpful, is just we did flip completely to remote teaching and assessment immediately COVID hit, having not done it before. And so the team has got, had to go through a lot of the pain that some of you are looking at in terms of how do we do remote invigilation. We remote invigilate all our exams at all 3 levels of the qualification. And just as a reminder there, what we're giving exemptions for is test of competence, our first level, which is largely at knowledge and comprehension. And that's the bit that under the Companies Act, we're allowed to give exemptions for if our students have covered that knowledge and had it examined at as part of a university degree. So it's that test of competence first level, but we do invigilate right across all 3 levels. And that means we remote invigilate objective test questions. We remote invigilate some open book exams and, report writing exams. So it's a whole variety. Also, just to say that the principles we followed as we did that are the same principles that we will be looking for universities to show us they followed. So for us, it was, at the time we did it, it was continuity. We wanted students to be able to progress with their careers, but we had to make sure we still complied with government guidelines. And integrity, that second important principle there, that's the one that we've really got to test in discussion with you and understand what you're doing. And that plays to, your invigilation setup, your policies around that and the exams. For us, it was a lot of student onboarding, comms and trainings. It was our exam panels and boards. It was the other checks we did around plagiarism. So it's looking at the whole picture. It's not just sort of hard and fast black and white rules. A lot of the other bodies have covered, the core bits around protecting the integrity of the exam paper, making sure we're testing the right syllabus learning outcomes, because effectively we're giving an exemption because we've, relied upon you testing the knowledge on our behalf, albeit that the students need that knowledge in the latter levels. I thought it would be maybe a bit of therapy to remind us we're all in the same boat as this happened. So this was the outcome of flipping to all of remote assessment in particular so fast. Our students have ended up being immensely proud and grateful to be able to continue. I think we were one of the only bodies that didn't stall their qualification, but yes, it did cause angst for everybody concerned along the way. And our, Chris did ask me to say, and our colleagues in our assessment team are always very happy to share their experience of how we've put in place the remote assessment that we have. So in terms of how we look at this going forward, so for us, universities are encouraged to use a wide range of assessments appropriate to the subject matter and the assessment criteria, and that includes invigilated exams, class tests, coursework, presentations. And as an RQB, a recognised qualifying body for the audit qualification, we are also regulated by the FRC, and it is their guidance and their interpretation of the Schedule 11 of the Companies Act, which I invariably have sitting on a rare piece of paper on my desk. It's their guidance that requires us to say that at least 50% of the marks for an accredited degree module should be assessed by an invigilated exam. That current relaxation of this requirement for COVID, as you know, is due to end on 31st December 2021. We did go to the FRC and ask them when they were going to update for further guidance, and the message was that there's no plan for further guidance. So the implication is we revert back to that old 50% rule. I think I should flag here there is a difference, therefore, in the treatment of Scottish and English universities, because a lot of Scottish universities tend to assess their first term or semester material in December, so falls within the current relaxed guidance, whereas many English universities tend to assess in January. So we have already raised this disparity with the Financial Reporting Council, but they have stated at the moment there's no plans to extend the relaxation in the rules to, for example, 31st of January 2022. So that means from the 1st of January 2022, we will be following the FRC guidance back to that 50% should be assessed by closed book invigilated exam, because really it's only by closed book that we're testing their knowledge rather than open book. But the guidance does not require, in our opinion, face-to-face invigilation, as others have already said. So if face-to-face invigilation of exams is not possible, what level of proctoring will we expect assurance on? We haven't specified any requirements for the nature of invigilation of such exams, because it's quite difficult to, there's so many parameters that could be at play. It's for the universities to put arrangements in place that you believe minimise the risk of students being able to breach your exam regulations by, for example, taking additional time, getting help from other people, or by some other means. It will be for us, and I guess the other bodies on this call, to obtain information about and assess these arrangements so that we can give credit for prior learning, as we want to do for exemptions, where the exams have been held under conditions that mean, we just want to see they've been held under conditions that mean that the exams are a fair test of students' knowledge and understanding. And what we'll be doing is we'll be asking each accredited university for a formal note of their assessment process, which will be followed, looking at the integrity of that process as a whole. So it's not just a confirmation you're remote invigilating. We will want to just have some guidance as to how you're approaching it. And Chris's message was, and I know he does a lot of work directly with the universities we accredit, we'll work quickly with universities on a case-by-case basis to gain the necessary level of assurance over the exam process. But at the same time, making sure we're treating students fairly. And I've seen a lot of comments in the chat about, constraints with broadband and all sorts of other factors that do come into play. So consideration will be given by us to the measures in place to provide assurance throughout your exam setting, sitting, marking and moderation process. Our assessments have been online, as I said, since April 2020, and we've remote proctored everything since June 2020. There was one diet that wasn't remote proctored. We've therefore worked with our regulator on that journey and continue to do so. And there's been a whole amount of process and policy that's gone into that, and we're very happy to share our experience or arrange for a conversation to talk to you about that. We've used live remote proctoring in pilot. We've mainly used recorded remote proctoring. We obviously have got round those concerns about student privacy. I wasn't here at the time that was set up, so I can't tell you exactly how, but we can come back with more on that. And our 3 key learns really are, you know, the importance of communication, the open dialogue with not only your students, but with us, and, you know, for us with the regulator. Same process throughout the course for mocks, exams and progress tests. We found that gave candidates familiarity with what you might be introducing and reduced the exam day stress, notwithstanding my earlier slide. And then our final learn was don't underestimate the amount of time the process takes or the cost. I think people like to think that once you did away with an in-centre and an invigilator, it was cheaper, but that's not our experience. So, I mean, overall, I think for me, we have to remember we're in COVID circumstances. That means we have to all operate differently and have that open dialogue. I think as bodies, to Tim's point around innovation and assessment, we all want to see that. And at a later level in our qualification, we do have open book exams, and we've just introduced, you know, some continuous assessment, which is totally new for us. And we're working with our regulator on making sure they're comfortable with that. I'd also say if you look internationally in the accountancy world, there's bodies overseas that have gone further with assessment innovation as well, and they may have a different regulatory landscape, but I think together we need to work with the regulator to allow assessment innovation to happen and still protect the integrity of the qualifications we all award. That's all I was going to cover, Joan. I hope I'm within the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Alice. Alice, sorry, can I just, so you're saying that if face-to-face invigilation is not possible, then you're not going to dictate to the universities that they've got to use proctoring. Have I got that right?
We will still, no, I think we still have to operate that you've got to have 50% of the accredited course assessed by invigilated exam.
Right, so the 50% has to be either face-to-face invigilation or some sort of proctoring.
Yes, but what we won't specify, for example, is that it has to be automated proctoring or in-person live proctoring or recorded. We look at the whole setup for you.
Yeah, well, I think it's largely consistent, isn't it, Judy, with your position and Lorraine's position, that you're not going to dictate to the universities how they should do the proctoring, but you expect that if there's no face-to-face that there is proctoring. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Just to get it all clear here, sorry, I just don't want any confusion over what's not been allowed. Okay, so that seems to be saying that ICAS, ACCA and ICAEW are really expecting the same thing with respect to the face-to-face stroke proctoring, and CIMA are taking a different approach. Now, can I just, there are a few comments here following on, Alice, from your discussion. First one is, how does the, and this is for Lorraine as well, how does the closed book requirement, because you said it had to be closed book, Alice, the 50%, how does that fit with the ACCA requirement that level 6 can be open book?
I'll need to take that one away, and we'll have a discussion about it. We can come back to the group. We just need to have a think about that one. So I don't have an answer, apologies.
No, that's okay. That's, yeah, because what you're saying is that if one institution were to go for ICAS and ACCA qualifications, then I don't know what it would have to be. Would it have to be closed book? Probably. I don't know. Not sure.
So I think Lorraine and we will have to pick that up, because if we look at the schedule, it's where you're testing by exam a theoretical knowledge, and I guess the question is, how can you test that knowledge if they've got a book in front of them? So I think our assumption was that if with the 50% guidance, that bit would have to be closed book. But Lorraine, I suggest we take that away and make sure we're aligned in our approach, because I don't see how we could be at a different place on that.
No, definitely.
Okay. Just let me get the next comment following on from you, Alice. Somebody, right, I'll come back to that other one. Could we have a summary of the status of whether open book exams are possible from the 4 bodies? This is for the 50%, I think you're talking about, Sam. So for the 50%, are open books possible? Well, let's just, so ICAS, you've already said no. ACCA, you've said yes, is that right?
Well, open book, we've said that we were talking about open book within the context of an exam window, a larger exam window, and the current thinking is...
I couldn't quite hear.
Sorry, the current thinking is we wouldn't accept that.
Oh,
So
just say that again, Lorraine.
when we were talking about open book examinations, you know, when I had the table of what was acceptable, not acceptable, so in the not acceptable column, we were thinking that when you take away an exam, remember it prompted discussion about 24 hours or 48 hours. The current thinking is open booking exams like that with the longer time window wouldn't be acceptable.
Yes, so you would be happy with an open book exam provided it was done within, say, the 3 hours.
Well, the current regulations in open book exams, like not thinking about delivery, is that we allow open book exams if they're in the final year of a bachelor degree or in a postgraduate qualification.
Okay, so we should take that. So would it be right? Sorry, Lorraine, just to clarify, would it be right in saying the answer is no, except for final year?
Except for final year bachelors or postgraduate. Now, given that we're going to have further discussions about open book examinations with a larger time frame, we are obviously going to have to look at those statements to see if they still make sense, the current regulations on open book, and whether they make sense still or not.
Okay, well, I do open book exams in my modules, and I just give them 3 hours.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just me. So ICAS, your position is no for open books, open book exam. ACCA, no, except for final year bachelor's or postgraduate, but within the sensible time frame, bearing in mind, Lorraine, the 3 hours plus.
Yeah.
And then Judy, what about you?
We don't have a specific rule because I go back to my point that I made earlier, which is it needs to be robust. So if it's a multiple choice knowledge-based exam and they're sitting there with a book, you probably conclude that's not robust. But if it's a skills-based exam, the open book's of little value. So it you know, we leave it to you to determine what's appropriate.
Okay, perfect. And then CIMA, I take it the answer is yes. Open or closed, it doesn't.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Yes.
Does that clarify that for everybody? I think that ICAS and ACCA, you maybe need to have a discussion about that. Alice, what's the objection to an open book exam? Is there an objection?
Well, I think it's exactly as Lorraine says. I mean, when the reason the three of us have restrictions and are imposing restrictions on you in terms of how we do it is the legislation and the FRC's interpretation of it. We are only allowed to, if you like, delegate responsibility for assessing the student's knowledge and comprehension, the theoretical knowledge component of the exam, to universities if they have an examination. And as I say, the FRC currently guide us that 50% of that needs to be invigilated exam. And it's just to the point that Judy made. You know, we're basically substituting the degree they do with you for their, you know, what if they didn't have the exemption with the university, we would test their assessment by objective testing, and their knowledge would be assessed, it'd be closed book, and it would be invigilated. So we're saying that for the 50%, we're asking you to examine and invigilate that it needs to be closed book, because otherwise you are effectively, you know, allowing them again to just have the knowledge in front of them and answer the questions as they go. So that was our stance before COVID as well. We can certainly engage with the other bodies and see if there's merit in changing it. And we would then have to engage with the regulator, I think. They've got to be on side.
Yeah, I when I talk about an open book exam, personally for me, Alice, I'm talking about an exam that you can't just cog out of a book. It's completely applied, and it's, you know, you even having the books is of little value at all, because you spend that long, you know, going through the books that you're not going to get the answer. You need to get on with actually understand what it is you need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And we have open books in the middle level of our qualification where we're testing application and analysis and a bit of evaluation and judgment, much more than pure knowledge and comprehension. So for us, it's that distinction.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally it would be good for the profession as a whole if we were to have more open book applied examinations rather than regurgitation of technical material, which, I mean, you can teach a parrot can do technical material, but it's the thinking and the applying that's the difficult thing.
Yeah, and you know, we have exams, as I say, at the latter levels that test that extensively, and our basis really for testing the knowledge and comprehension at the start is to set students up for success, to know that they can progress through with a good chance of success at the later levels. But I do agree with you that I think as a whole, as a profession, we do want to be, moving assessment styles forward, being able to innovate, but still protect the integrity of the audit qualification, which is what the FLC seek to do. And in answer to somebody just posed the question, is there a way to communicate the message to the FLC? I think we have been having a lot of discussions with them about moving assessment forward, just in going to remote invigilation. So even us going all out remote invigilation, that was put through our paces to make sure that they were comfortable. And I do think that as a group of bodies, not just professional bodies, but universities as well, we have to keep that dialogue open and try and enable us to move forward.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So, so Lorraine and Alice, are you going to get back to us about this situation? I mean, it'd be ideal, Alice, if you could move to allow an open book, but open book applied exams rather than just, nobody wants just an open book exam, because people are going to copy stuff, and where's the sense in that? Okay. Can I just go back through some of the points made? Pauline wants to know, does the FRC publish its criteria? Would somebody kindly maybe search for that and put it into the chat line, if you wouldn't mind? Okay, James. No, I want to just go back up to some of the other comments that were made earlier that I didn't get a chance to look at. There were a few concerns. For example, somebody had said that students can share on WeHat. I don't even know what that is myself. I must be too old for this game, but I think it is a problem sharing materials. Then somebody else talked about that surely we can't allow 24-hour window for an exam when students could share the paper. I have to say, personally, as an academic, I think I agree with that. I think that's madness. But anyway, that's just me. Then Sarah, you had said that you give roughly 10 minutes to upload. We give about 15, but anything within an hour, provided they have the date stamp, they take the photograph and they have the date stamp, but to prove that there was a problem. And Anne is asking, what length of exam do you have when you give them only 10 minutes to upload? But I think the point of this question is, do you allow extra time for the students due to having to type? Now, this is an issue, isn't it? But typing exams. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I would assume, well, do we give extra time if you're going to type? That's one question. Any experiences of that in the room? If you're asking the students to type their answer as opposed to write it, do you give them extra time?
At Bristol, that's why we gave a whole extra hour. It was to allow upload time and also the difficulty of having to type the exam and also only have that single screen. Whereas, of course, when you do an exam on paper, it's much kind of easier to write and also see.
Okay, Sam, thank you. Now, a question I had about this, certainly in my external examining, was where all of these typed pieces of work being put through Turnitin? And I would assume that for integrity, they would absolutely have to be put through Turnitin. Has anybody anything to say about that? No.
Yeah, I do. I'll come in. I was just waiting to see if anybody else would come in. I'm quite invested in this, and I've just recently gone through this with our retake students. So we insisted that anything that was written had to be typed and went through Turnitin, and I have picked up quite a lot of collusion cases. We actually did have a situation where somebody hand wrote an exam and contravened those rules, but actually hand wrote it within the software, so on an iPad or something like that, rather than uploading images. And Turnitin actually managed to pick up collusion on that script. So I was really impressed with Turnitin at that stage with a typed script. And that's one of our cases. The issue that we've had is what we do around students who actually ignore the rubric on the front of the exam and just try and be fair to students there. So we have had some problems with that.
I think think also, Sam, there can be potentially an issue with cutting and pasting and putting quotations at the start of the cut and the paste, and then highlighting the quotation in white so the quotation doesn't show up. So we all need to be aware that the students can try and trick us in every way possible. A few other points here. Yes, Danielle, thank you. We use Microsoft Lens, which is the thing we use to capture the pictures. Let me go on to the next thing. Magda had asked a question, what about exemptions granted on completion of a programme? Do we still need to have invigilated exams online or face-to-face? I'm not sure I understand that.
I might be able to add some thought around that. So we have one particular module within the ACA, it's a certificate level module called Business, Technology and Finance. Because it's so broad, it's quite shallow learning outcomes, but based across a lot of subjects. We do often award it based on the degree awards. So if you get a 2-1 or a first in a relevant degree. And what we've been saying in those circumstances is obviously the degree itself is accredited, so the accredited modules within it will come under these general rules. But say there's an economics module where the exam wasn't invigilated, we wouldn't withdraw the credit. I think that answers the question. I think that's what's being asked.
I see. Okay, thank you, Judy. Yes.
Can I add quickly something to my question here to clarify the point?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine, for this. We have an accredited master's program with ACCA, MSc Accounting and Financial Management, and we have 4 exemptions based on completion of the program, but they're not linked to specific modules. So what would be the situation in that case? Do you still insist on vigilant exams, or are we free to have the 24-hour take-home assessment, or, you know, what's the situation is?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for background, ACCA, similar to what Judy mentioned there, we will offer an automatic exemption based on the national qualification awarded in the overall subject area. So accounting degrees or master's degrees generally attract in the UK exemption from the first 4 papers. It wouldn't, similar to what Judy mentioned there, it wouldn't be our intention to remove exemptions. However, I think the same expectations would probably be there around ID authentication, integrity of the exam for the automatic exemptions as well. But that's a really good question for us to take away and consider.
Okay, that's great, Lorraine. If there are any outstanding issues like that, Lorraine, and I think it was somebody else earlier on, if you can feed back to Sarah or myself, you know, these updates, then we can send them back out. Okay. Now, Angela has asked the questions, do all assessment elements need to be exam type questions? Can it be, for example, 25 midterm coursework and 75% final online exam? I'm going to say I think the answer is yes. It can be. The professional bodies are not telling us how to do our jobs, but we have to consider the criteria that they have already outlined clearly. Okay, let me go on down to the next one. Okay. Okay, so here's a James Rylott has said maybe a longer term answer for ICAEW and ACCA would be to unbundle the audit qualification from the underlying qualification. The vast majority of qualified accountants will never sign an audit opinion. So I think James must be talking about moving away from the FRC kind of restrictions. I don't know. That's a big debate that one would want to have. So I don't think we should get into that today.
We've got the whole Bryden report, and the new auditor profession would do that for us, but it's going to be a long time coming, so I don't think we'll answer it in the next 24 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Okay, next one from Lisa for ICAEW and ACCA. What needs to be demonstrated to provide assurance to you that remote invigilation set up by our institutions meets your requirements for the invigilations being sufficiently robust?
So I think, as I said before, we don't have minimum requirements for remote invigilation, so we leave it up to the university to meet their own. They've got your own quality assurance, haven't you? So if you're going to remotely invigilate an exam, I'm assuming that means you will have sight of the student. That's the requirement. So however you want to do that, we've seen various different ways over lockdown, some more sophisticated than others, some as straightforward as students are in a Teams meeting and they're in small Teams groups with one member of staff, 4 students or something. It doesn't have to be high tech. It just depends what you can put in place.
Okay, interesting question, Paul. You've asked, can we ask one of the professional bodies to say what online invigilation provider you use? Will you be able to tell us that or not?
Yeah, it's not a secret. We use Proctor Exam.
Proctor Exam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about Lorraine? Can you tell us, or are you allowed to divulge? Do you know? Maybe you don't.
I don't actually know if I can divulge.
That's
so that
okay.
Yeah.
That's all right, Alice.
I think we've been using Proctor Exam too, but I'm not the person closest to it. And we're also, I would say, looking at implementing a new assessment platform as well, which will have Proctor built in, and that may be a different provider. So, you know, we have looked at different providers.
Okay, perfect. That's okay. What about, can anyone else in the room here that is using Proctor software, can you tell us what proctoring software you're using? Is there anybody in the room here that's using proctored software and for accounting at the moment, or is at least planning to, or has bought it, or is planning to buy it? And which provider are you using?
Just as was said before, somebody said that they use Teams and they just put them into small groups and so on. We're just using our VLE and just having a member of staff who's in the group with them. We're using Collaborate on Blackboard. It's not perfect.
Would that for the professional bodies, would that be appropriate for us to set up small teams of say 10 or whatever it is on Teams, and for us to be watching them?
We have been accepting that because, as I say, this has had to move very quickly, and we appreciate you've got limited resources at your disposal and it takes a while to put something more sophisticated in place. And I think you have to imagine a massive, great big exam hall with 200 students in it and a couple of invigilators pacing up and down. It's equally as robust, isn't it? The students that are determined to cheat, it's going to be impossible to say you're never going to stop cheating. So it's the best that you can put in place that is as robust as you can possibly do.
I think that as we are now, you know, I can only see your head and shoulders and immediately behind you. I can't see anything to the right of you, to the left of you, below you, above you. And I think that's true when we're proctoring the students in this way, that somebody could be passing them something on the table and we wouldn't have any idea. Whereas if you're in an exam hall, you know, then you do tend to be able to pick that up. I found students cheating that way in an exam hall, having said that, but you know, you have to be a bit braver, I think. Then it's more possible online than it is in an exam room. Incidentally, we have made the decision to go to face-to-face in-person invigilation, even though we have been proctoring all the way through the pandemic.
Okay. I mean, our remote invigilation software, what it does is the student has to have their mobile phone switched on as well. So they have the phone capturing them at one angle, they have the webcam capturing them at another, and then screen share. But obviously that takes a lot of time and money to put that in place.
Yeah, we don't have screen share. We have to, the person doing the invigilating has to be watching the people all the time and sort of be second guessing whether they're looking to the side and, you know, there's somebody else in the room with them or whatever, you know, you're sort of, and then it's very difficult to prove it, although we are recording it, so you can go back and have a look at it afterwards. So, you know.
Sarah, you would like to say something?
Yeah, hi. I recall attending a session a few months ago that discussed this, and there was one HE, I think they were based in Australia, and they started to invigilate, you know, virtually and watching the students, but there was a backlash by students because they didn't know who was watching them, etc. and they decided not to take, and I hope I interpreted this correctly, and they decided not to go ahead with it, and that there was, data protection issues with all this as well. So I'm interested to know, of those HEs that have already, and the professional bodies who have already used this kind of invigilation, how do they go around that?
Well, we just tell them what's going to happen. We tell them there's going to be a person who's going to be watching them, and we get their permission to do it. You know, if the person gives permission, then you're not infringing their rights, are you? They've given permission.
Yeah, that touches on, Sarah, the whole human rights element of it. I mean, I don't know. Do the professional bodies have any of these problems, or do they just say this is the way it is? You take it or leave it?
I mean, we offer a choice, but there isn't always a choice depending on the situation in that country at that time with lockdown, for example. But students at the moment in the UK can choose between in-centre or remotely invigilated exams. And some prefer the remote option, some prefer to go to a centre. The main question that we had over record and review was how long we store the videos for, and we do destroy them after once the exam results are adopted, so they're not held. So that was one of the data protection questions that we found cropped up regularly.
But do you have you had any students complaining about human rights violations and privacy, etc., Judy or Lorraine or Alice? No?
No.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, so maybe it's up to us to manage our expectations of our students, that this is just the way it is. This is the new life that we have to enter. I don't know. Hossam is asking, would you accept Exam4 software is used by CIOT where you take the ID and a face photo is taken an hour before the test, but there's no live invigilation? Probably not. No. Okay. Okay, I'm keeping them going on down here. Okay. I'm just keeping on going down, sorry. Okay, James has made a point about Schedule 11. The qualification may be awarded to a person without a theoretical knowledge of a subject being tested by examination if he has passed a university or other equivalent or other examination of equivalent standards in that subject or holds a university degree or equivalent qualification. He's saying the or is interesting. Sorry, that's maybe a bit too complicated for this conversation.
Well, I think James's point is just right in the sense that I think somebody else put later, the legislation doesn't impose the 50%. That's the FRC's interpretation. Okay. And it is, the FRC is the government guardian, if you like, of how the legislation is complied with. So okay. We have to have those conversations with them. Yeah, it is interesting, James.
Okay, sorry about that, Alice. Does the situation drive the change of assessment philosophy from knowledge-based to skill-based in the near future? Is there any way to communicate this to FRC? Well, I would hope there would be, that we're trying to make better accountants out of these people, but I don't know. Right, Darren, there is an issue of a wider exam training industry to consider. I'm not sure what that is. So Emma has written a very interesting comment. Our students type faster than they write. Liz has said we give 1 hour for typing and uploading. Peta has said a student with reading stroke writing problems may have to type their exam. Yes, but I still think that we need to do the put it in to turn it in, and beware that the double explanation marks aren't highlighted in white. Okay, hold on, I'm just Hillary's saying we give double the normal time to allow for typing. So there's quite a variation here in how much time people are giving for typing. Okay. I'm just going through them, sorry. Anne Stafford is saying all our written exams go through Turnitin, excellent. Hillary's saying we put scripts through Turnitin. Emma's confirming that also, that's brilliant. Say we give 125% of the normal time when they type their exam, so you're given 25% extra, so again, more variation. Somebody else, Alice, yes, Deacon is saying they go through Turnitin, brilliant. A whole lot of people are saying everything goes through Turnitin, so that's fantastic. Oh, here's Sue is saying we have problems because I think you mean Turnitin picks up all the figures as being similar. Oh, misconduct has gone through the roof. That's a problem, but I don't know what to do. Misconduct at another institution, Nottingham, Trent, is also an issue. Lots of people are saying there's misconduct up across the board. So here's Hillary. We only allowed Word submissions, not Excel, which they find difficult. Every script goes through Turnitin. We had 7 students who submitted the same paper. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Students also make deliberate spelling mistakes to try and fool plagiarism software. Danielle is saying there's a whole website on how to circumvent Turnitin that is being passed around students. Danielle, do you have the link? You're going to try and find it. Other people are saying it takes a lot of time to go through these academic misconduct cases. Okay. Danielle, you've got it there. Did everybody see it? Maybe put it in again, Danielle, would you? Because I'm moving through. I don't know if people are at the bottom of this list. Kate is saying we are looking into software. She's saying that ICAEW, she thinks, uses Pearson software. I don't know about that. Do you know anything about that, Judy?
That's at certificate level.
All right. But that's not really appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, that's not ours.
Okay.
So the students go to Pearson to sit certificate level exams. Yeah.
Okay. Anne Stafford from Manchester's raised a really interesting point. I'd really like to understand why some universities are happy to use proctoring software, while my university says there are legal problems. We have more than 400 students on many courses. Teams or Zoom is not possible. We plan to use on-campus exams for any students who want accounting accreditation. So, yeah, what is the big, I mean, I don't know. I mean, surely the legal advice can't be correct if one university in the UK is saying it's not appropriate and another is saying it's okay. There's something wrong there with the legal advice. Would you agree? There's something wrong there.
I just don't understand it, because I think we're being told that there are student privacy issues, and there's been some comments on that in the chat, which I get, but there are also problems as to where the data is being stored, and that's causing problems with student privacy as well. And I think our university is there's probably a spectrum on this, and our university would appear to be at one end of the spectrum, but clearly you know, we're the biggest one campus university in the UK. We have 40,000 students, and you know, insignificant little accounting problem is I'm not going to get anywhere with my university in trying to deal with this, and it's causing us huge problems as a accounting and finance group as a consequence, because I can't get any leverage.
Thank you very much, Anne. Somebody else, Danielle, you've put in a very important point that there have been several complaints of invigilators scoping rooms and even asking students to move the cameras across their bodies to ensure they have no materials in them. And what you're saying is there needs to be significant training on the do's and don'ts and what's acceptable. I do agree with that. What else here? BCU Rod is saying uses DigiExam for PSRB exams, including LPC. So DigiExam and LPC, whatever that is. And there's Anne, you're saying your legal department would disagree, they wouldn't allow that. Okay. Let me just see if there's any lot here. Yeah. Sarah from De Montfort is saying we had a lot of issues with students utilising the same calculation templates and correct figures, hence showing very high Turnitin similarities. Or did they all get it correct, or did they all copy from one person? But surely that's an argument then for us to stop having exams where you need to have more applied exams where there you know, would that not be the answer to that? have more application where students can't cheat.
Totally agree, Joan, but it just doesn't always, for certain subject areas, they've got to go through a certain amount of the calculations for sort of tax, FR, there's certain bits they have to do. And yeah, that was an issue that was constantly coming up for academic practice issues, was it looked like everyone had copied, but maybe they hadn't.
Okay. Well, could you not then, Sarah, for say 25% of the answer, get them to interpret the figures, actually get them to write something? That would be the way around, and then you could differentiate who knows what they're at.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the case, but in a lot of cases, our students don't often attempt the written bits anyway. Okay. Even in a normal world, they just don't attempt the written bits. So you still didn't end up with much, and you still end up going through the, do you have to hold them in front of somebody for academic practice?
Okay. Emma is saying, we asked the students to download a document which watermarks the document with their student number and records who access the document. That's interesting, Emma. How does that look like? What does that look like, Emma?
So we simply provide a template in which they've got to provide their answer. And when they download that template, it watermarks it with their student number. And then they have to upload that back in. And so we can see all the editing that has been happening in that document. I mean, it doesn't stop them WhatsApping each other. It doesn't stop them sitting in a room and doing it together. But it has helped us a lot in terms of students not being able to circumnavigate that.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think you're right, Emma. We have to try and circumvent them and make it more difficult for them. Right, let's see what else here. There's Lisa Wakefield has put an interesting options in an article. I don't want to click that because I'll get distracted. So there is a link there if you want to look at that. Samantha says Digi exams locks the PC to prevent access to unauthorized material and can be used on or off campus. That sounds good. Take a note of that. Digi exams. Samantha, how does that work? Is Samantha here still? Samantha Roberts?
She is. Sorry about that.
That's okay, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's not without its issues, most definitely, and it can't be used on Chromebooks and various things, and the students have to download software to do it if they do it off campus. But we've actually got an entire exam suite, if you like, a PC lab that's loaded with this software that we can book, so we can actually have digital exams held on campus and they're invigilated. So it kind of gives potentially the best of both worlds. We're just looking at remote proctoring for those students that can't come to campus. But as I say, it's not perfect. It's definitely not without its issues, but it's definitely one potential solution or part of a solution.
So would they, Samantha, the student, if somebody sent somebody a file to copy and paste, they wouldn't be able, this thing would stop them from doing that?
My understanding is it completely locks down the machine that they're on. So they can't only access the exam that is in front of them.
That sounds brilliant. Okay, there's a point here as well. When would ACCA be able to provide confirmation regarding the closed open book issue? Would ACCA also accept invigilation via MS Teams like ICAEW? So Lorraine, that's for you.
Yeah, again, we wouldn't dictate how an institution goes about their invigilation. You know, if they can be satisfied with the 3 factors that we laid out through Teams, then yes. In terms of coming back on the open book issue, if I could have a week or 2 just to make sure we have all the conversations internally that we need to, and we'll come back, Joan.
Perfect. And then Sarah has said Respondus via Canvas does the same that Samantha is mentioning. So it does the same as Digi exams. So there's a couple of things. Now, is there anything that we haven't, I mean, we've talked a little bit about remote proctoring, and there seems to be differences between institutions in terms of some saying it's legal, some saying it's not, but I really don't know how to resolve that. Maybe should we have another session at some point in CDAF about proctoring to try and make a bit more headway with this and to share experiences? What do you think? With that, yes. So I've got 1 thumbs up.
I think that'll be worthwhile, considering the context and where things are going. Everything's going online now, so.
Okay. Lorraine, I have another query here for you. It says, Lorraine, when would ACCA be able to provide clarity on the issue of exemptions awarded upon completion of degree and the requirement for invigilated exams? Does that mean exams that already have been taken that weren't properly invigilated? Is that what that's referring to?
That's referring to, so there are, as I was saying, there's a small number of exemptions given on completion of a programme. So for example, an accounting degree, it's generally the first 4 papers that will give us exemptions. So if I could have the same time frame to come back on that one.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, because it's something that obviously impacts some of our modules for whether they're going to need to be having online or face-to-face exams. So
I'll come back and confirm, but I really can't see us starting to remove those exemptions based on invigilation practices, but I will confirm that for you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Well, look, we've really almost, I think we've come more or less to the end, but just before you go, those of you who do want to say to the second session, which we would love you to do, Paul, would you please, Paul, would you put in that that link again to this? It's a very short survey, and we're asking you for your name and your email address, and we can email all of you the summary that we've put together, which has the 4 professional bodies' responses about the questions that we discussed today. So, Paul, have you put that in yet? It's a way up earlier on, but Paul, can you put it in again? Sorry to ask it.
Yeah, I will put that in the chat. I've put a couple of links in the chat. One is to the questionnaire, short survey that we're doing as CDAF, which is asking you what of the CDAF activities you find most valuable, how you'd most like to hear from us, what would work best for you, and so on. And the other is a link to Accounting Cafe, which is a meeting place for accounting educators, and our next meeting is in a couple of weeks' time, to which everyone is invited. So I'll put both those links in the chat, and as I say, if you could complete the questionnaire for us, that will enable us to better provide information in the format that makes sense for you. It's also asking about suggestions for events and topics for workshops as well.
Okay,
so the link should be in the chat by now.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So you can see there the link. It's just once we get all of your email addresses, we can then send out the summary to you, because I think otherwise it's going to be quite difficult for us to do that. Just one final point that Sue has raised and Sarah at De Montfort has an issue, and they're saying what we really have is an issue is either L3 first year exams, which are currently online objective questions, either 2 or 3 hours, but for 400 students. Getting them into an exam, all with social distancing, is impossible. If we could put invigilation for the direct modules that attract exemption, it would really help. If we could, I don't, sorry, Sue, do you want to just say what you mean by that last little sentence there? If we could put invigilation for the direct modules.
What I'm saying is we have invigilations at level 5 and level 6 and level 7. You know, the second, third year. They're smaller, very specific accounting modules for accounting students, and those directly attract exemptions, so tax, audit, etc. And we don't have a problem with invigilating those in an exam hall, because we can put, a smaller cohort in a big exam hall. Our problem is the sort of common first year modules that are taken by, entire schools. They don't directly attract exemptions, but as our colleague, I think it was Magda, said, they're sort of general exemptions. And, some clarity over that. I think it was Magda's question. I can't remember. Apologies, Magda, if it's not you. That's what's really confounding us at the moment, the thought of trying to get some sort of invigilation for 400 students.
Okay, so Judy, do you want to, so you're talking about exams that don't have a direct kind of link with a module, but nevertheless are part of the degree. So Judy, what do you think?
I think that was more of an issue for Lorraine. I mean, we just have the one module that I mentioned, which is business technology and finance, which generally is spread across a lot of topics. And our stance has been that if the directly accredited modules meet our requirements for invigilation, we are not concerned by the non-accredited modules that meet a couple of the learning outcomes. It'll be things like economics.
Yes, okay. Lorraine, do you want to say any? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Lorraine, sorry.
Sorry, so I think it's the same as the couple of points that have been made previously on automatic or framework, or also known as blanket exemptions. We give up to 4 papers automatically, depending on the subject major. As I said before, we will come back and confirm our position. I can't see a world where we would start to remove those exemptions because of invigilation practices. But it could be that our expectations are the same as the paper for paper exemptions, but I will come back and confirm that.
Okay, thank you. And Alice, do you need to say anything for that?
No, I don't think there's anything I need to say there.
Perfect. Okay. Well, listen, I think we've come to the end. We have scheduled now a coffee break and networking from 2:30 to 3 before we start our next session with Hilary and Jenny. So it was lovely, everyone, seeing you. I really think this has been a brilliant discussion today. And there are so many people are interested in this. And yes, it is a difficult issue, but I think together we'll work together and we will get through it. So if you haven't had a chance yet, please do try and fill in that short survey, which will give us your details, and we can forward on then the summary that we've created. Okay, so we'll start again at 3 o'clock. And thank you. Sorry, Judy, I forgot to say thank you, Lorraine, Tim and Alice. There was somebody else there now. I've missed them somewhere in the crowd here. Tim is, no, not Tim, someone, sorry, apologies, I've missed someone out there.
Dominic,
apologies, Dominic, I shouldn't be forgetting you because I know you and you're around all the time, so excellent.
That's fine.
Okay, so if you want to stay for a few minutes and have some discussion or whatever, grab a quick cup of coffee and then come back. We'll see you back at 3 o'clock, or we can just stay on and chat.